Dr. Ju Park had spent most of her professional life surrounded by ice, not mysteries. As a glaciologist, she was used to studying ancient ice cores and climate patterns, not decoding what looked like alien technology. But on that particular day, as the Antarctic wind howled against the thin walls of the research station, her monitor showed something she couldn't explain. The ground-penetrating radar had pinged back an anomaly, a massive, perfectly geometric structure lying 2 kilometers beneath the ice shelf. At first, she thought it had to be a glitch, a reflection, a sensory error. But after rerunning the scan twice and double-checking with the backup system, the readings remained the same. It was no natural formation. It was a shape too precise, too symmetrical a structure, buried where no human had ever built anything before. "Director Kim," she called out, her voice shaky as her gloved fingers tapped the keyboard. "You need to see this." Dawan Kim, the head of the station, shuffled over, his expression neutral until he saw the monitor. The blue light from the screen lit up the deep lines in his face. His eyes squinted at the scan. "What am I looking at?" "Something artificial," Ju said, her voice low. "Something that shouldn't be here." Within 72 hours, the entire research station was transformed. What had once been a quiet outpost for environmental studies became an international hotspot swarming with helicopters, mobile labs, and top-tier scientists flown in from around the world. Engineers set up specialized drilling rigs. Military personnel established a perimeter. Satellite photos revealed the growing activity, and soon, reporters and drones began to gather just outside the secured zone. Ju, however, remained focused on the data. As the lead researcher on the anomaly, she had been granted clearance to observe every step of the excavation. The deeper they drilled, the stranger things became. The ice surrounding the object showed no signs of melting or structural disruption. Whatever lay beneath had remained perfectly preserved, untouched for thousands of years. When the drill finally pierced through and the camera was lowered, the world held its breath. The feed showed a smooth metallic surface, dark gray with an odd, faint shimmer. As the lens panned across, it revealed a hull covered in symbols ancient-looking, yet strangely familiar. They resembled human writing systems but predated any known civilization. Ju leaned in closer to the monitor, her heart pounding. "It's not just a structure," she whispered. "It's a vessel." The words sent a chill through the room, and through everyone watching the live feed. A ship, a starship, buried under layers of ice long before human history began recording time. That night, she couldn't sleep. She ran the footage over and over, replaying every angle of the strange markings. She discussed materials with metallurgists who confirmed the sample they extracted didn't match any alloy known to science. It was stronger than titanium, resistant to corrosion, and showed no signs of decay despite its age. "It's not just old," said Dr. Hyan Wu, the materials scientist from Seoul University. "It's ancient, and yet it's perfect." The governments involved tried to keep the discovery quiet, but it was too big, too incredible. The world was already buzzing with theories. Aliens, time travelers, long-lost super-civilizations. Some called it the biggest find in human history. Others called it a hoax. But for Ju, it was real, tangible, a truth she could feel in her bone. 3 weeks after the initial scan, a tunnel had finally been cleared large enough to allow human entry. Ju stood at the threshold with 5 others, 2 military operatives, an engineer, a medic, and the security chief, Ta-Ho Lee. They wore full suits with helmet cams, carrying gear for an 8-hour expedition. Director Kim tried to convince her not to go. "It's too dangerous," he warned. "Exactly why I need to be there," she replied. "I found it. I need to see what's inside." As they stepped into the dark passage, their lights seemed swallowed by the vastness ahead. Then something happened. Floor lights flickered to life, one by one, guiding them deeper into the unknown. "It's responding," Ju said, stunned. "It knows we're here." And so began the greatest journey of her life, not into the depths of ice, but into humanity's forgotten past. Whatever lay buried beneath Antarctica wasn't just a ship. It was a message, a key, a remnant of something far older than civilization itself, and it was finally awake. The cold metal surface hummed faintly beneath Dr. Ju Park's gloved hand as she stepped into the chamber, the air oddly still around her. The light from her helmet beam barely touched the far walls. Every breath she took echoed through the silence. They had all trained for this moment, entering a vessel older than human history, but no one had expected it to feel so familiar. The lights had turned on by themselves when they entered. Not all at once, but in a slow, deliberate sequence that suggested awareness, even intention. It was subtle but undeniable the ship was responding to them. Commander Tahoe Lee muttered under his breath, "This thing's watching us." His hand tightened around his weapon as the team moved cautiously down the central corridor. Yet the deeper they went, the more bizarre the readings became. The air inside was perfectly breathable, without a hint of decay or contamination. The temperature remained steady at a comfortable level, untouched by the icy depth that lay just meters above. And gravity had changed. Some areas felt lighter, as if the ship had tuned different chambers to different gravitational needs. But the most striking realization came when they reached what appeared to be the ship's command hub. It was a vast circular room, rimmed with control consoles and lined with symbols that glowed softly as they approached. In the center stood a raised platform, smooth and seamless, until Ju stepped onto it. Without warning, the surface lit up in a gentle blue hue. Symbols danced across it, forming patterns, pulsing like a heartbeat. "Don't touch anything," Tahoe warned, but his voice was already drowned by the rising hum of activation. "It's responding to her," whispered the ship's medic, watching his scanner nervously. Her heart rate spiked just before the interface lit up. Suddenly, a three-dimensional projection burst into the air above the platform. It was a star map, rich with constellations, planets, orbital paths, and movement trails that twisted and turned in complex rhythms. The hologram shimmered as if alive, adapting with every small movement Ju made. She gasped. "These stars? Some are out of place." The structural engineer stepped forward. "It's an old map. Either that or a projection of the future. Star positions change over millennia." As the team examined the display, several key locations began to pulse. Earth, Mars, Venus, Europa. "These match real places," Ju said. "Not random markers. These are destinations." When they relayed their findings to Director Kim at base camp, the implications hit like a tidal wave. This wasn't alien technology built by some unknowable race. No, the ship was designed for humans. Its controls, its environment, even its written language, everything pointed toward a single, staggering truth. This ship had been built by humans, or at least by something genetically compatible with them. Over the next few days, the exploration team ventured further into the ship. What they found was both awe-inspiring and unsettling. There were dormitory chambers, rows of sleeping quarters, all human-sized. Food production areas and water recycling systems were still functioning, silently maintaining an ecosystem long abandoned. There were medical bays filled with machines far beyond modern understanding. One section even contained vast chambers fitted with suspended animation pods. "This ship wasn't made for exploration," Ju said during a debriefing. "It was made to carry people, an entire population. It's an ark." She began to suspect something even more unbelievable. "I think ancient humans built this," she said one night to Director Kim. "Not just early humans, but a civilization far more advanced than we've ever recorded." Her theory gained traction as linguists began translating the symbols lining the walls. The characters bore resemblance to every known language group on Earth, as if they were the origin, the root dialect from which all human languages had descended. Then came the breakthrough. In a long, sealed corridor, Ju discovered a chamber filled with pictograph story panels that lined the walls, telling the tale of the ship's construction. It showed humans, unmistakably human, building the vessel with tools and technology that defied explanation. "They built these to escape something," she told Director Kim, showing him the final images. "A threat, a catastrophe. These weren't ships of exploration, they were lifeboats." And the final detail that changed everything: the ship had chosen her. Her DNA activated its systems. Her presence triggered its awakening, not just as a coincidence, but as part of a plan, one buried deep in the ship's design. Later, alone in the command hub, Ju stood again on the glowing platform. The star map reappeared, but this time it pulsed brighter, faster. Then, as if the ship had waited for this moment, a voice spoke from nowhere and everywhere at once. "Welcome home, child of Earth. Your inheritance awaits." She stood frozen, staring at the impossible message, her heart pounding louder than any machine. This wasn't just history. This was destiny. The idea had seemed absurd at first, laughable even. The notion that humans, or their ancestors, could have built a ship the size of a small city and buried it beneath the Antarctic ice sounded like something out of a conspiracy forum, not a scientific briefing. But Dr. Ju Park could no longer deny what was in front of her. She stood in the heart of the vessel, inside what the team had begun calling the history room. The chamber was vast and circular, with walls that shimmered like liquid glass. Along those walls, images moved, not projections, not carvings, but animated illustrations encoded directly into the surface. They showed people, humans, building this ship. The figures in the recordings wore strange clothes and moved with the calm precision of trained engineers. They handled devices beyond modern comprehension. Machines floated at their command, metal bent without tools, and structures seemed to rise from nothing. One sequence showed the ship's frame forming in orbit, then descending to Earth under its own power, settling into the Antarctic bedrock like a seed being planted. Ju's voice was quiet as she spoke into her recorder. "This isn't alien. This isn't foreign. This is us." The revelation shattered everything she believed about human history. For centuries, scientists had traced humanity's origins through fossils, ruins, and artifacts. They thought they understood the rise of agriculture, the birth of cities, the long, slow climb from primitive life to civilization. But this ship and the others like it told a different story, a hidden one. Ju stared at the timeline inscribed along the chamber wall. It began with a golden age millennia ago, when humans had mastered space, biology, and energy itself. Their technology dwarfed anything in existence today. The ships they built weren't just transportation, they were living ecosystems, capable of sustaining tens of thousands over interstellar distances. Some could even move through solid rock or reshape planetary terrain. The ancient humans had called themselves the Builders. But something had gone terribly wrong. The next images showed panic. Cities burning, skies darkened, great storms ravaging landscapes. Then a black wave, a force of void and destruction swallowing entire worlds. The Builders had called it the Void Current, a name that appeared again and again in different languages. It wasn't just a natural disaster. It was something alive, something intelligent, and it consumed everything in its path. The Builders knew they couldn't stop it, not entirely. So they turned to their last resort, preservation. They built the world ships, 8 in total, each one designed to carry a portion of their population and culture to safety, to sleep beneath the surface of worlds until the time was right. Earth received several. One landed here in Antarctica. Others were dispatched to Mars, Venus, and Europa. A few were sent beyond the solar system entirely. And then the Builders vanished. Not through extinction, but transformation. Ju moved to the center of the chamber where a control pedestal rose. When she placed her hand on the surface, a DNA scan flickered to life. The ship recognized her not as a stranger, but as a descendant. A genetic match. "We didn't just find this ship," she said later to Director Kemp. "It found us. You guys? It found us." The truth became clearer with each passing day. The so-called prehistoric era wasn't the beginning of humanity. It was the aftermath, the dark age that followed the fall of a once great civilization. The ruins of that golden age weren't lost, they were buried, waiting to be remembered. And now, they were waking up. Symbols carved into the vessel's corridors began translating themselves, revealing linguistic roots common to all Earth languages. Medical scans showed that modern humans carry genetic markers, intentional modifications designed to help their ancestors' descendants survive a planet after collapse. Radiation resistance, temperature tolerance, accelerated cognitive development in early life. We were meant to rediscover this, Ju realized. It wasn't a matter of if, just when. By the time she shared this with the global scientific coalition, no one laughed anymore. Skeptics had gone silent. Satellite data confirmed energy pulses from Mars, Venus, and Europa matching the locations on the star map inside the ship. One by one, the other world ships were beginning to stir. Humanity hadn't stumbled onto alien technology, they'd uncovered a legacy. A month after the discovery, the ship's guidance system, a holographic figure that called itself the Hess, finally confirmed it. The builders had encoded everything into the ship's knowledge, language, even memories. The vessels had waited for someone genetically compatible to return. Someone with the key. Ju Park had unlocked the first gate. The builders had given their descendants a second chance, but with it came responsibility, because the void current wasn't gone. It was coming back. It started with a flicker, a single energy spike registered by the instruments aboard the International Space Station, nothing more than a blip at first. But then it happened again, stronger this time, not from Antarctica, where the ship they'd uncovered lay dormant no longer, but from a new source, Mars. Dr. Ju Park sat in the HE's command hub reviewing a feed from one of the orbital telescopes when the alert flashed across her screen. "Another one's waking up," she whispered. The coordinates matched a location that had long puzzled Mars researchers, a jagged canyon system with magnetic anomalies too consistent to be natural. But now, the ship's own star map pulsed again, confirming what the builders had already known. Mars housed a second vessel, and it wasn't alone. Within 48 hours, similar energy signatures were detected from Venus and deep beneath the ice shell of Europa. All of them aligned precisely with the points marked on the ancient navigation map the HE's had shown them weeks earlier. What they'd thought was an isolated miracle was in fact just one piece of a vast, carefully hidden fleet. It hit the scientific community like a thunderclap. For every question they'd just begun to answer, a dozen more emerged. Were these ships identical to the Hess? Did they hold more advanced technology? Were they also awakening? Because something was coming? Global agencies scrambled to respond. The European Space Agency rerouted a probe that had been heading for Europa to investigate the emerging energy field. NASA accelerated its Mars-based rover missions to locate the source on the Red Planet. China and India coordinated satellite surveillance of Venus despite the brutal heat and pressure of the planet's atmosphere. The North, once fractured by borders and politics, was now unified by a singular realization. There were more ships, and they were no longer dormant. Back at the HE's site in Antarctica, construction efforts intensified. What had started as a scientific excavation now resembled a full-scale base of operations. Teams from over 30 nations worked around the clock, not just to study the ship, but to prepare for contact with its counterparts. Inside the HE's, systems were coming online at an accelerating pace. Lights illuminated new corridors. Displays that once showed only static now pulsed with data, weather, planetary alignment charts, galactic communication arrays. The vessel wasn't just awakening, it was reaching out. Ju spent nearly all her time in the command hub with Haiyan Ryu, the systems engineer who had become her closest collaborator. Together, they mapped out what the ship was doing. It was syncing, pinging the others, establishing a kind of interstellar handshake between vessels that had been silent for millennia. "It's like they're talking to each other," Ryu said one evening, staring at a 3D visual of pulsing star map nodes. "Not just waking up, coordinating." The holographic guidance figure who had introduced herself as HE's, a construct left by the builders, confirmed their theory. The ships, she explained, were interconnected, each designed with a specific purpose, each waiting for a signal that their descendants were ready. And now, that signal had been sent. "It was your activation, Dr. Park," he said. Your genetic match triggered the synchronization protocol. The fleet is responding. The word fleet hung heavy in the air. As Earth's leaders were briefed, the implications deepened. These weren't just preservation vessels or mobile colonies. They were a network defense array created by a civilization that had once spanned the stars and had anticipated an existential threat. Each ship on Mars, Venus, Europa, and elsewhere had its own design, strengths, and mission. But they had all been built with a singular purpose: survival. News of the awakenings was made public, and humanity's imagination exploded. Crowds gathered in every major city, staring at live feeds of Martian dust swirling around newly visible metallic structures. People watched satellite imagery of Europa's ice cracking open, revealing dark shapes deep beneath the crust. Some felt awe, others fear. Back at the Hees site, Ju stood with Director Kim atop one of the newly erected observation towers. They looked out over the Antarctic horizon, now dotted with temporary labs, comms arrays, and guard posts. So it's true, Kim murmured. We weren't alone. We were never meant to be. Ju nodded. This wasn't an accident. They left these ships for us. They buried them so they'd survive, and programmed them to wake when we were ready. Ready for what? She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes were fixed on the holographic display beside her, watching as new markers blinked into focus, ships waking one by one across the solar system. To stand again, she said finally. Together, as a fleet, because something ancient had stirred. And now, the forgotten guardians of humanity's past were rising one world at a time. The message came from beyond the edge of the solar system. Shortly after the activation of the Hees and the awakening of the other world ships, Earth's orbital satellites picked up a strange signal. It wasn't just random static or unexplained bursts of radiation. It was deliberate, structured, intelligent, and it wasn't from Earth. At first, global space agencies dismissed it as a false positive, some unknown solar echo or reflected pulse from the newly awakened ships. But when the signal began translating itself using linguistic keys embedded in the Hees systems, doubts vanished. The words were clear, undeniable. We greet the children of the world shipbuilders. Your awakening echoes across the stars. Panic and excitement rippled through every layer of government, military, and scientific command. Humanity wasn't alone and never had been. Just weeks later, 7 alien vessels dropped out of faster-than-light travel and entered Earth's orbit. The ships, unlike anything humans had ever seen, floated silently above the planet. Some were crystalline and translucent. Others were sleek and curved, their surfaces shimmering with alien alloys. They didn't fire weapons. They didn't issue demand. They waited. Earth responded quickly. A neutral meeting platform assembled from parts of the International Space Station and International Orbital Modules was constructed in record time. Diplomats, scientists, and military experts were selected for humanity's first official contact. Dr. Ju Park stood beside Ambassador Suman Baya as they boarded the shuttle that would carry them to the meeting. Her stomach twisted with tension. It wasn't just the weight of history. It was the fear that everything she believed about humanity was about to be redefined again. The meeting chamber was circular, designed to accommodate beings of varying shapes, sizes, and atmospheric needs. When the airlock hissed open, 5 alien representatives entered. One floated above the ground, glowing faintly with internal light. Another walked on 6 limbs, its skin color shifting like a mood ring. A third looked eerily human, tall and slender, with silver skin and vertical pupils. The fourth wore a pressurized suit, its true form hidden, only multifaceted insect-like eyes visible through its visor. The last was amphibious, with webbed hands and visible gills fluttering at its neck. I am Speaker Ulam of the Tidal Confederacy, said the amphibious one, bowing its head slightly. We come on behalf of the Galactic Concord. Ambassador Baya nodded. We welcome you in peace. The glowing being drifted forward. I am Observer Tellus of the Photonic Collective. We did not come here lightly. Your ships, your inheritance is not unknown to us? Juice's ears perked up. You knew about the world ships? Not new, Tellus answered, its chiming voice almost musical. We feared them. Your ancestors built them during the final warships that could bend stars, move planets, even extinguish them. The room went still. Commander Mon Kang, seated behind Zhu, stiffened. They were meant to preserve life, he said defensively. Yes, said the silver-skinned figure with a faint smile. But preservation and destruction are two sides of the same blade. The builders were complex. Speaker Ulam took a step forward. We know the legends. 50 millennia ago, a species emerged across the stars, human in form, bound by purpose, wielding power no civilization has since matched. They created the world ships not as tools of conquest, but as last defenses against the void current. Zhu exhaled slowly. The name again, that terrible name. So it's real, she whispered. The void current wasn't just a myth. No, said Tellus. It is returning. Your ships woke because the ancient threat stirs again. The alien delegations revealed more over the next hours. Stories passed down by species who had seen the builders rise and vanish, accounts of entire star systems transformed by world ship technology, scattered records of the Great Retreat when the builders altered themselves genetically to survive Earth's post-collapse era. You are their descendants, said Ulam, the survivors of the storm. You were never meant to forget, only to remember when the time was right. The realization struck the human delegation with the weight of revelation. Humanity hadn't just stumbled upon alien ships, they had inherited them. They were not newcomers to the galactic stage. They were returning architects, long thought lost. But with that legacy came fear. Can the galaxy trust you? Tellus asked bluntly. You are young, divided, still at war with yourselves. Yet now you possess technology that once shaped galaxies? Zhu raised her eyes. We didn't ask for this, but we'll rise to it. Not as conquerors, but as guardians. That evening, as Earth looked to the stars, its people knew. They were no longer just human. They were the last echoes of a forgotten age, the builders reborn. At first, the data made no sense. Dr. Zhu Park stood alone in the command hub of the Hees, her eyes scanning a stream of readings displayed across the holographic interface. The ship had been running silent analyses for days, pulling from its vast network of instruments, some buried deep beneath the Antarctic bedrock, others extending into orbit. And now, it had detected something. A distortion. A fluctuation in deep space, unlike anything human science had ever observed. Not solar flare activity, she whispered, fingers dancing over the panel. Not gravitational lensing either. The hologram shifted, transforming into a real-time projection of a sector near the galactic edge far beyond any human probe had ever reached. At first glance, it looked like a dark void, empty and still, but then the interface enhanced the image. A black wave was moving slowly, relentlessly across the stars, swallowing light as it advanced. Stars disappeared into its path. Radiation patterns collapsed. Even gravity distorted unnaturally. Zhu felt the blood drain from her face. Vahiz's guidance system appeared beside her as a holographic woman, serene and composed. This is what your ancestors feared, she said gently. The void current has returned. Zhu stared at the projection. It's alive, isn't it? The figure nodded. It consumes not just matter but energy and information. It does not feed, it erases. Panic surged through her chest. She summoned Commander Munkang and Engineer Haiyan Ryu. When they arrived and saw the scan, the room fell into silence. This wasn't supposed to happen yet, Kang muttered. We only just reawakened the fleet. It's not coincidence, Zhu replied. The ships woke because of this. The void current is the trigger. Over the next few days, a series of emergency meetings were held on Earth. Representatives from every major nation gathered in secured locations, some underground, others aboard high-orbit satellites. The data was shared. The void current wasn't a myth from a dead civilization. It was a returning force, and it was on a direct trajectory toward populated regions of the galaxy. "We have 2 years," Ju said during one of the briefings, pointing to the timeline overlay on the projection. "If its velocity holds, it'll begin consuming star systems by the end of the 2nd year." The room erupted in anxious voices. Military officials demanded weaponization of the world ships. Politicians argued over control. Scientists questioned whether the ships could even fight something so vast. Ju raised her voice. The ships were not just meant to escape, they were meant to fight back. The Hees had been quietly reactivating systems for weeks. As more access was granted through genetic matching and neural interface trials, humanity learned more about the world ship's true capabilities. They weren't just transports or mobile colonies. They could bend space, redirect gravitational flows, and generate containment fields unlike anything in human science. "They can reshape the battlefield," said Hien Ryu during a systems overview, "and possibly cage the void itself." Soon after, ships orbiting Mars and Venus began to send similar readings. The other world ships were also scanning space, also seeing the current. They, too, were preparing. The Galactic Concord was alerted. Alien vessels from across dozens of species arrived in Earth's orbit in unprecedented numbers. What had once been a cautious diplomatic presence became a united front. The threat was no longer theoretical. Ambassador Suman Ba met with the Concord Council in orbit, standing before them not as a representative of Earth, but as a descendant of the Builders. "We didn't choose this fight," she said, "but we won't run from it." All 7 active world ships were called into orbit and formed the nucleus of a growing interstellar defense fleet. Engineers from Earth and alien worlds collaborated inside the ships, attempting to learn everything possible in the shortest amount of time. The Hees revealed one more crucial truth. The ships had been built not just with physical defense in mind, but with a living key: humans themselves. Genetic memory embedded in their DNA allowed direct neural connection to the ships. It wasn't learning, it was remembering ancient instincts, reflex. Commands spoken not with words but with thought. "This is why we're here," Ju told the Emergency Earth Council. "Why we were made this way. They didn't leave us a weapon, they left us a chance." And humanity seized it. Across Earth, military forces set aside rivalry. Scientists shared data freely. Former enemies trained side by side in zero-gravity simulators. The ships responded with increasing speed, their systems humming with energy as if they too felt the pressure of what was coming. From the far edge of space, the void current continued its approach, a storm that erased stars and collapsed civilizations. But this time, something waited for it. Not refugees, not survivors, but descendants of the Builders standing ready in ships the size of planets. Captain Moon Kang stood at the edge of the Hanel's command deck, staring at the star field displayed on the main screen. The world ship, now fully powered and orbiting high above Earth, hummed with quiet, controlled energy beneath his boots. Around him, dozens of operators worked stations that only weeks ago had been completely foreign and now responded to human hands and thoughts like old friends. Below, Earth looked peaceful, but that calm was a lie. Across the planet, humanity was changing. The threat of the void current had done what no treaty, no summit, no war had ever managed. It forced the world to unite. Old rivalries were set aside, walls fell. Satellites and military networks, once fiercely guarded by individual nations, were now synchronized, feeding into the world ship fleet's growing neural core, because survival demanded. Inside the Hanel and her sister ships, teams from every continent, engineers, linguists, physicists, even biologists, worked day and night alongside alien allies from the Galactic Concord. They translated the Builders' systems, reverse-engineered propulsion modules, and tested neural interfaces that let humans think in the language of the ships. Knowledge poured from ancient archives, maps of long-lost star systems, combat tactics written in symbols older than any Earth script, and warnings from the past too urgent to ignore. These vessels were never just transport ships, Dr. Ju Park said during a high-level strategy session. They're adaptable. They can change shape, deploy weapons that use space-time distortion, and generate fields that counter entropy. They were built to fight this. By then, 7 of the 8 known world ships had been activated. From Antarctica to Mars, from beneath Europa's frozen crust to the searing atmosphere of Venus, the massive vessels were online, slowly syncing with each other. Each one had a name, a personality, and a purpose, remembered by the ship's own guidance systems, AI-like constructs designed to teach and advise their new human operators. And across the solar system, the signs of the void current multiplied. Dark regions of space began to shimmer unnaturally. Observatories detected the silent deaths of distant stars. Energy patterns collapsed into nothingness, like candles snuffed out in a storm. The current wasn't approaching by accident. It was hunting. Humanity responded with speed the rest of the galaxy hadn't expected. What took other species centuries to master, humans were grasping in months. Neural sync protocols were integrated with trained world ship pilots. Artificial gravity fields, once misunderstood, were now being weaponized. Crews trained in silence, sleeping in shifts, their dreams filled with images pulled from the builders' memory cores. Ambassador Suman Baya stood before the Galactic Council and said what everyone had been thinking. We were never meant to stay small. Our ancestors built the world ships not to escape, but to return. And now we remember who we are. The Concorde, initially hesitant, began to assist in earnest. Dozens of alien vessels joined the human fleet, offering support, technology, and reinforcements. Some races had been ancient allies of the builders. Others had once feared them. But now, with the return of the void current, they stood side by side with their descendants. Aboard the Hanel, Hyen Ryu and her team discovered something buried deep within the ship's data archives. Battle records from the First War. The builders had faced the void not just with strength, but with sacrifice. They had moved stars, collapsed wormholes, and extinguished entire solar systems to redirect the current. The final weapon they created, one never used, was a recursive energy loop, a way to trap the current within itself. But the loop required perfect alignment between all world ships. If we try it and fail, Ryu warned during the briefing, the collapse could destroy everything within several light years. We'll only get one shot. Captain Kang took a long breath. Then we'll make it count. On the eve of deployment, Earth stood still. In every city, crowds gathered around screens, watching as the fleet formed in orbit. 7 massive world ships floated in perfect formation, their surfaces glowing softly, reflecting starlight. Around them, 1,000 smaller ships, human and alien alike, took up formation. It was the largest fleet ever assembled in known history. As the countdown began, Zhu Park stood in the Hanel's command hub. She placed her hand on the main interface, feeling the familiar pulse rise beneath her palm. "They left this for us," she whispered. "And we're ready." The void current was nearing the inner rim. Time was running out. Captain Kang's voice echoed across the fleet. "All ships, maintain formation. Neural links active. Engage fold sequence on my mark." They were no longer fractured nations. No longer a species clawing for survival in a vast, indifferent galaxy. They were the descendants of the builders. And they were going to war. It began with silence. Not the peaceful silence of space, but the kind that settles before a storm, the kind that tightens your chest and makes your instincts scream. From the bridge of the world ship Hanel, Admiral Moon Kang stared at the incoming readings. The void current was no longer a distant rumor or a slow-moving anomaly on a holographic map. It had arrived. Out past the sickness rift, the void churned a wall of nothingness, pulsing with darkness that consumed light, gravity, even time. Telescopes showed stars winking out like dying embers. Long-range drones simply ceased to exist the moment they touched the current's edge. Admiral Kang tightened his grip on the rail. This is it. Across the fleet, world ship captains activated their neural link. The bridge fell into coordinated motion as data surged across minds and systems, connecting humans to ships, ships to each other, and the entire fleet into one seamless consciousness. It wasn't just military precision, it was intuition powered by legacy. At the center of the formation were 7 fully awakened world ships, each the size of a moon, each now linked to a human inheritor who could command its systems as if born to do so. Around them, a sprawling armada of alien vessels stood ready, ships from 37 spacefaring civilizations, all watching Earth's descendants take the lead in a battle millennia in the making. On board the Hanel, Dr. Ju Park paced beside Hyen Ryu in the command hub. Just days earlier, they'd uncovered the final secret locked in the Builder's memory archives, a fail-safe strategy encoded in ancient neural map. The world ships could create a recursive loop of folded energy, a trap to turn the void current inward, causing it to consume itself. But it required flawless synchronization. If one ship breaks the formation, Hyen warned, we could lose the entire sector. Maybe more. Zhu didn't flinch. Then we don't break. The command was given. 7 world ships shifted into heptagonal formation, their gravity drive syncing like the gears of a cosmic machine. Each captain connected via neural interface, no longer thinking with their own thoughts alone, but as part of something greater. Centuries of knowledge flooded their minds. Reflexes they'd never trained became instinct. They weren't guessing anymore. They were remembering. The void current surged toward them, its surface writhing with tendrils of anti-energy. A dozen alien vessels vanished in an instant, erased as if they had never existed. But the world ships held. Their energy fields clashed with the current's edge, sending shockwaves across space-time. The builders had prepared for this. Their designs worked, but barely. Jingjiu, the outermost ship, began to falter. Its stabilizers buckled under the relentless pressure. "She's failing!" came the cry through the neural net. Without hesitation, Hanel and Xianga broke position, flanking the struggling ship and locking in a triad pattern. Energy surged between them. 3 ships reinforcing one, generating a new resonance. The current hesitated. "It's working," Hyen breathed. "We're pushing it back." Across the network, Admiral Kong shared the triad's new field pattern. One by one, the remaining world ships mirrored it. The energy began to ripple, then reflect, bouncing the current's force against itself. Tendrils recoiled, some collapsing in on themselves with pulses of distorted light. The battle raged for 3 days. In that warped section of space, time bent strangely. Seconds stretched, hours blurred. The combined fleet suffered losses, dozens of ships wiped out, entire alien crews lost in the fight. But the formation never broke. And then, on the 3rd day, Zhu found it, the key sequence for the recursive fold loop. A precise algorithm woven into the world ship's core memory, requiring perfect neural alignment between all 7 captains. "This is it," she said, transmitting the command sequence to Admiral Kang. On the Hanel's bridge, Kang closed his eyes. "All world ships, the final phase. Hold position. Lock in the loop. Now." Energy surged like nothing ever recorded. Space screamed as reality itself bent inward. The current struck again, harder than ever, desperate, knowing it was being trapped. But the ships held. Each captain bore the pain of feedback through their neural links. Blood ran from noses, ears, eyes, but no one broke. Then, with a sudden blinding flash, the void current collapsed. Silence returned, but this time it wasn't dominant. It was peace. It was peace. The enemy that had nearly ended an ancient civilization had been defeated not by gods, not by aliens, but by humans who remembered who they were meant to be. A month later, Admiral Kang stood before the newly reformed Galactic Council, with Jue Park and Ambassador Sumanbaya beside him. Delegates from every allied race rose in a single unified gesture of respect. "We didn't ask for this legacy," Suman said, her voice steady. "But we embrace it not as conquerors, but as guardians." The galaxy had watched Earth rise from obscurity to leadership in mere months. But it wasn't a rise. It was a return. The builders had not vanished. They had become us. And now, their children stood at the helm not just of ships, but of destiny. A new age had begun. The war was over, but nothing felt the same. From the observation deck of the world ship Hanel, Admiral Moon Kong looked out over the endless sea of stars. Below him, Earth turned slowly, serene and beautiful, unaware of how close it had come to vanishing into silence. Around the planet, remnants of the once massive Allied fleet drifted in low orbit, their hulls scorched from the battle, their flags still flying in unity. It had taken everything they had to stop the void current. Now came the part no one had prepared for: peace. Aboard Hanel, systems hummed with new energy. Since the collapse of the current, the ship's memory banks had unlocked even more knowledge: architectural blueprints, genetic records, entire libraries of information from the age of the builders. The crew now understood. The world ships hadn't just been weapons or arcs. They were repositories, carrying forward every piece of wisdom their creators feared would be lost to time. And now, they belonged to humanity. The Galactic Concord wasted no time in recognizing what had happened. Within weeks, representatives from over 40 civilizations gathered in orbit above Earth in a newly constructed diplomatic station. No longer skeptics, no longer wary observers, they now came as witnesses to history. Ambassador Suman Baya stood at the center of the Grand Chamber, flanked by Zhu Park and Admiral Kang. Cameras broadcast the session to billions across the galaxy. "We are not what we were," Suman said, voice steady, measured, "but we are what the builders intended. We survived. We remembered. And now we return, not as heirs to a throne, but as servants of peace and protectors of life." There was silence. Then, Speaker Ulam of the tidal Confederacy rose, his voice rippling like waves. "The Builder legacy is now in your hands. We acknowledge Earth as the guardian seat of the world ship." One by one, other representatives stood and voiced their assent. And just like that, Earth, a planet once dismissed as primitive, became the core of a new galactic era. In the days that followed, the world ships were no longer seen merely as war machines. Their true power lay in their adaptability. With knowledge recovered from the Builder archives, Hanel and her sisters began transforming, reshaping their internal architecture to support diplomacy, exploration, science, and defense. Whole cities were constructed within their halls. Laboratories, universities, gardens, and habitats for dozens of species began to bloom inside structures once designed for battle. Dr. Zhu Park oversaw the creation of the Builder Memory Archive, a neural link database that merged genetic memory from the world ship AI with humanity's newly awakened knowledge. She spent most of her days now teaching new generations how to understand the legacy they inherited, not just technically, but morally. The builders weren't perfect, she often said, but they learned, they sacrificed, and they made sure we would have the tools to do better. Back on Earth, old lines of conflict faded. The United Nations was replaced with the World Ship Authority, an international and now interstellar body charged with stewarding builder technology. No single nation controlled the ships. No one government gave orders. The world ships answered only to a council formed from Earth and its allies. Admiral Kang, promoted to fleet commander, began organizing exploration routes beyond the current galactic frontier. He knew there were still more secrets left behind by the builders' lost colonies, unactivated ships, ancient strongholds scattered across the void. And then there were the messages. As the world ship's long-range comm arrays were fully activated, signals began pouring in encoded transmissions from civilizations that had fled the galaxy before the First Void War, descendants of builder outposts, survivors from ancient alliances. Some asked for help, others simply said, "You've returned. We've been waiting." The galaxy, once vast and mysterious, now felt like a family rediscovered. But it wasn't without its burdens. Some Concord members feared that too much power rested in Earth's hands. Others demanded that humanity share every ounce of builder knowledge immediately. And within Earth's own ranks, disagreements flared. How much should they explore? What technologies were too dangerous to revive? In one high-level debate, Suman addressed the council. We were given these tools because our ancestors believed we could do better. The world ships are not weapons to control others. They're shields, libraries, homes. We're not here to lead by force. We're here to lead by example. And so, Earth's role was cemented not as rulers of the galaxy, but as stewards of a legacy too important to hoard. As the first fleet of exploration vessels departed Earth orbit led by Hanel, Xianga, and Jingzhu, their hulls shimmered with builder alloys and human markings side by side. On board were humans and aliens, scientists and diplomats, soldiers and explorers. Their mission: to learn, to protect, and to unify. And somewhere deep in the builder core systems, another message activated, one meant for the future. To those who awaken this fleet, remember, we were not the end of greatness. You are the beginning of its return. The stars no longer felt distant. From the command bridge of the world ship Hanel, now fully operational and recommissioned as the flagship of the newly formed Galactic Defense and Exploration Fleet, Admiral Mun Kang watched as the ship prepared for departure. Behind him, thousands of crew members from dozens of species moved with precision and purpose. They were no longer just passengers aboard a relic of the past, they were its future. 6 months had passed since the defeat of the Void Current. The world ships had held the line, and humanity had proven not only their readiness but their heritage. Earth, once considered a backwater planet on the galactic map, had become the heart of a new alliance. And the world ships, long dormant, had become instruments of renewal. Coordinates set for the Vela Expanse, announced navigator Suen Yun. Admiral Kang nodded. Begin fold sequence. A gentle hum filled the air as the Hanel's core began to resonate with energy. Space rippled around them like water disturbed by a stone. Then, in a brilliant cascade of light, the ship vanished, slipping through folded dimensions, racing toward a frontier untouched since the time of the Builder. The mission was simple: explore, reconnect, and protect. After the war, it became clear that the galaxy was far larger and more fragmented than anyone had imagined. Whole regions remained unreachable, cut off during the first Void incursion. Lost builder colonies had gone silent. Thousands of outposts scattered throughout the spiral arms still waited, untouched for 50,000 years. Earth couldn't stand still. It had to reach them. The World Ship Authority, now Earth's central leadership body, had worked closely with the Galactic Concord to draft a plan. Each world ship would act as an autonomous exploration base, traveling to sectors that held significance in the Builder archive. Each carried a mix of specialists, humans and aliens alike, trained in linguistics, engineering, diplomacy, and defense. Ju Park, now chief archivist of the fleet, had chosen to remain aboard the Hanel. She spent her days deciphering ancient Builder star maps and hidden command sequences, using a direct neural link with the ship's core AI. There are still messages out there, she said during a briefing. Breadcrumbs left by our ancestors, warnings, instructions, hope, and there was more. With the activation of the full Builder memory cores, humanity began learning things that once seemed impossible: techniques for shaping gravity, methods to regrow dead ecosystems, energy systems that produced no waste, no heat, no instability. Even rudimentary terraforming technologies, tools once thought to be science fiction, were real and functional. But knowledge came with responsibility. The galactic community had entrusted Earth with power and expected it to be used wisely. Ulam, now the title Confederacy's ambassador to Earth, often reminded Admiral Kang during diplomatic meetings, the Builders fell not because they were weak, but because they overreached. Balance, not dominance, must guide your people. Kang agreed. Every new breakthrough was debated. Every deployment of Builder technology went through the Ethics Council. No one wanted a repeat of the arrogance that once nearly ended civilization. Still, the sense of momentum was undeniable. On Earth, peace blossomed in ways never thought possible. Former enemies now worked side by side to develop interstellar infrastructure. Builder-inspired education centers sprang up in cities across the globe. Young students learned both Earth history and Builder's star lore. They memorized constellations from 2 timelines, the sky of today and the map from 50 millennia ago. One student said during a televised interview, "We're not just learning who we were, we're learning who we can be." And far beyond Earth, the first seeds of a galactic future were taking root. Aboard the Hanel, Ju Park walked along a corridor newly renovated into a greenhouse. Sunlight artificial, but warmth streamed through the transparent hull as plants from Earth, Arikara, and Lurian grew in perfect harmony. Children from 5 different worlds chased one another through the garden paths. Their laughter echoed to the ship like a promise. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about legacy. It was about building something better. One day, as the Hanel arrived at the coordinates of a long-lost builder beacon, the AI reactivated a dormant archive. A final message appeared, projected in the center of the command deck. The language was ancient, but the translation was clear. To our children, wherever you may rise, do not repeat our fall. Carry forward our hope, not our pride. If you remember anything, let it be this: we were not gods. We were dreamers. And this galaxy is still dreaming. Admiral Kong stood in silence for a long moment. Then he turned to his crew, eyes steady. "We've inherited more than ships," he said. "We've inherited a mission to keep the dream alive." As the Hanel moved forward into the unknown, it wasn't with the arrogance of conquest or the fear of extinction. It was with quiet determination, the kind born of memory, sacrifice, and second chances. The stars were waiting, and this time, humanity wouldn't be coming alone.